Hello and welcome to my presentation on auteur theory. Um, auteur theory is basically a theory um, that says that all directors have their own style and they all make films differently, but their styles can be identified by various signifying features. For example, with Quentin Tarantino, with his aesthetication he has a he has an authentication of violence with non-linear storylines, but he also likes to work a lot with the same actors. Referencing to his films also are reference tributes to films or comics, and he has long shots slash takes and scenes. Also with Quentin Tarantino, they also say with auteur theory that it's like how the director sees the world. It's like their vision of the world, and it's like when they make the film, it's something they want to share with the world. And auteur theory, it's also they say it helps industry because when directors design their own movies, it's like they're developing new ways of doing things, which in turn helps develop the industry and in some way moves the industry on. It moves the industry on and it develops it because if they find new techniques and ways to do things, they can make films better and more improved and realistic. Another theorist, a French filmist called Alexander Ustrick, came up with his own theory called Le Camera Stylo, which means camera pen, and it's basically saying that like every that like an artist uses a pen, an artist uses a paintbrush to paint a wonderful portrait. A author uses a pen to write a novel, and a musician uses a sympathy to perform some music. They use like an instrument to make a sympathy, or however you say it. And it's the idea that filmmakers use the camera in the same way, and they use the camera to create a wonderful piece of art. And he Alexander Usher wanted um, he wanted he felt that film required an academic respect, and he knew that there was a deeper meaning for it than just films. There was another theory where, a group of French filmmakers started writing a magazine to share ideas about film, and they were building on Alexander Ustrick's ideas. They created the name auteur, which they took from, I think, the person which Andrew Saris took, and that's how he developed his auteur idea from that. Um, and they published an article called Les Politiques de Auteur, and auteur means author. Then it's just the same thing about how they thought film required respect as directors use signifying features in their films. So we know that it's like Hitchcock and Wells. They respected films from America because at the time French films referred to cinema de papier. The films they were portrayals in books, and they weren't regarded as a bad film if they were portrayed like they were, and they didn't really try to experiment or try to come up with any alternative type of films to produce. So then they came up with slapstick, which seemed like an intelligent to them, and therefore more academic and intellectual content to them. Um, and the slapstick was the alternative type, and yeah, as I said, they thought it was more intellectual and more intelligent. Um, Also, there was a thing called polemic, which was the argument on paper, where director Jean-Luc Godard, he was a filmmaker who created films that experimented with film, like shots with like a boom mic and keeping the real sound in order to establish how films was quite artificial and how that they made the film, and there's a really art to making the film. Slide 5, auteur theory. Andrew Saris thought the meaning, he took the meaning of auteur and he changed it into a theory. He thought it was a theory. He agreed with the French filmmakers and theorists in that he wanted film to be more academic and have a lot more respect, like in Hollywood. And and he was saying that, and he said Hollywood as academic through, and he said the epidemic came from a lower class medium. He set about establishing a film canon using the auteur theory to measure the quality of a director and see whether they were worthy of a film canon, and that's like a big award to say how good the director is. And for directors to achieve the acclaim, uh, they were required to be an expert in all filmmaking and have as much control over the film as possible. Um, and this helped move film on in some ways. Um, and Andrew Saris discovered that how the director can create symbols and hidden messages in the films for the audience, and that was quite clever. And then, because the audience were clever enough to interpret these and see them for what they were. For example, like there are in some films like Hitchcock, Alfred Hitchcock used production related jokes. For example, he would make camos in his own films and come into his own films, even though he was a director, just for a bit of a laugh. And that is what quite a few directors do nowadays. So that helped develop industry. In contemporary times, Andrew Saris is now regarded as a mistranslating auteur by grading films and seeing it as a theory. Les Quinze de Cinema were the most accurate in their interpretation that films should be respected, and what they were trying to do was expand on film so creative content was accessible everywhere. Auteur as a theory, it doesn't work too well because everyone is different and can interpret films in their own way. For it cannot be levelled as good or bad, but can be distinguished by director characteristics, by the director being a progressive filmmaker. So in terms of it being able to enhance industry, I think that's good. But everyone, as I said, develops and looks at films differently, so you can't really grade it as a good as or bad film. But Andrew Saris was right in saying that different people and directors, they do have their own traits in films and they do add little bits. And you can sort of say that, look, this is Ridley Scott's film because it uses these conventions, and you will constantly see these conventions being used throughout the film. Now for some background information on my director. Well, Ridley Scott is an English director and producer who is 74 years old, or at least he was when I wrote this script. And he was born on the 30th of November 1937. He has made some big hits like Gladiator in the year 2000 and American Gangster in 2008, which are, of course, epics. Ridley Scott's studied at Grangefield Grammar School from 1954 until 1958. Ridley Scott studied later at West Hartlepool College of Art, where he got a diploma in design. When Ridley Scott first started directing, he was an admirer of Stanley Kubrick, and that is probably where some of the way his films come from and some of the ideas that he's developed and adapted. In 1968, Ridley and Tony Scott founded Ridley Scott Associates. It is a film and commercial production company with five members of the Ridley family. Um, five members of the Ridley family work as directors. In Ridley Scott films, over 50% of the actors he has worked with come from elite drama schools and theatres such as the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Globe Theatre, the Old Vic, and the National Theatre in London. Ridley Scott uses these actors because he feels they bring a bigger presence to the screen. And Ridley Scott also uses Russell Crowe a lot in his films, and these are some of the conventions he uses. I've also explained and given a breakdown of the conventions in my PowerPoint, um, which I'm not going to explain in this script because they're fairly straightforward. In terms of critical approaches and like audience reception and defining audience, I would argue that Ridley Scott doesn't have to define his audience because his audience is already designed by the genre he works in, which is primarily epic films, which already has a very big audience. However, this is not to say that Ridley does not have a hand in defining and profile his own audience, as he has had a massive impact on the modern day epic genre. So some of the people that are into epic films are into them and they like them because of the films that Ridley Scott has made. So he has helped develop the audience for the epic genre. I'd say the main people that Ridley Scott's, I would say Ridley Scott's audience are primarily mainstreamers and aspirers because his films are very popular. A lot of people like them, and because of the celebrities within them, like Russell Crowe, Orlando Bloom, that's why people watch them, and that's a good thing. I'd say also, his films are mainly watched by males in terms of audience profiling. However, they do attract females because of the romantic element. I would also argue they are not restricted by location, age, or race. However, some of his films could offend some religions like Muslims. Give example if Ridley showed them in a negative way in films such as Kingdom of Heaven. However, I don't think he does. The majority of the audiences that watch Ridley Scott's films have preferred readings, as most of the reviews of his films are positive, and they always do well at the box office. Sometimes his films sometimes some of the audience views might be a bit aberrant, of an aberrant reading, as not everyone who watches his films understands the true meaning of them, in my opinion. In terms of narrative, Ridley's films are always multi-strands, as they have a number of different events that happen throughout the story, and there is always a lot going on, from action with fighting scenes to romance and then even to some comical moments. The majority of the time, Ridley's films are built around the classical Hollywood narrative, which was developed by Russian film theorist Togorov. Ridley uses this structure as his films always have a clear middle and end, and most of the time they start off with some sort of equilibrium. Then there is a problem, and then that equilibrium disappears. Then they go through a stage in the film where they are solving the problem, when they're trying to solve the problem, and they would be on like a quest or some sort of goal. Then in his films, the goal seems to be reached at a certain point in the film, but it, and a lot, but then a lot has changed throughout his films, and there's a new equilibrium, but things have changed a lot, and it's almost like at the end of his films now the world's a better place and it's gone back to normal, but in a better way. Um, and I'd say it's like in stuff like American Gangster, like everything's fine, um, but then everything's normal, but then the his boss dies and he takes over and everything's fine, but then problems start arising when people are dying from the drugs, and that's a big problem. But then Russell Crowe comes in and his team of police and that take down Frank, and then people stop dying from drugs as much, and they reach an equilibrium where a lot has changed. The bad guy's been put in jail, but a lot people have gone through a lot. But Harlem's back to like a sort of safe city um, again, which is great. Um, Also, right, which is and then that in terms of audience reception theories and audience theories to do with the media. I'd say the cultivation theory is a theory that I think fits into some of Ridley's films, as it says the more people that watch the media, the more likely they are to develop certain views in the world. And I think when people see it, they could possibly be slightly influenced by certain views he might hold about the world, which might not necessarily be right because they've seen his films, they could be more likely to agree with his views, as it could show his views in a positive light. But I don't think this is intentional. For example, in Prometheus, people might start to believe that well, the people in there that created that it was that we were created by some like ancient alien race, and they could start to believe that that's how we was created, and that the thing that created us will eventually destroy us in some way. And I think also very just shows that the director has a lot of power over how the film looks and how the film feels, to the point where it could influence us. But in terms of Ridley's films, I think they might influence us slightly, but not in a negative way. I'd also say that the uses and gratification theory, I think, can explain how Ridley films work, as it's argued that people all read the media differently because based on their personality and belief system, and the media can enhance understanding and beliefs, but it doesn't have the ability to change the belief acquired from experiences in life. And I think this can explain why people do have mixed reactions to Ridley films, and they all respond differently. However, mostly it's positive, because a lot of people, I guess it can suggest that there are quite a lot of people that do have similar life experiences, and that can affect the way they feel. And that could be how the audience is developed from the genre, because the people that like these films have similar lifestyle choices and similar lifestyle experiences.